Documentary photography can seem like the most uninvolved photography, which does not mean that it is a lazy style of photography. I believe it requires as much, if not more, effort than other styles, and certainly more patient diligence than any other form of photography. Documentary photography rejects the idea of manipulating the subject or background of the photograph in any way. It captures the moment as it is, documenting without altering or staging any part of it. Documentary photography has a vast number of applications, starting with photojournalism and street photography to weddings, events, and even concert photography. In amateur photography, it is often referred to as candid photography. But everything, even paparazzi pictures, that captures something without posing or directing falls under the category of documentary photography. Now, some people would consider this too broad an application for the term documentary photography, since each of these styles or categories have several unique features which distinguish them from one another. To me, they are all subcategories of documentary photography. But for argument's sake, I will allow that some of these can be considered documentary style photography, though not strictly documentary photography. Many people will specifically distinguish between documentary photography and photojournalism, saying that the first focuses more on long-term perspective, while the latter on breaking news. In my mind, you never know which photojournalistic piece will become a key part of documenting history, and so I think of them as more closely related. Regardless of where you draw the line, the unarguable characteristics of documentary photography is that the photographer attempts to influence the subject of their art as little as possible. Usually this will mean avoiding any posing or directing, always shooting on location, and in all ways trying to keep the environment as natural as possible. Why is documentary photography so popular and so impactful? The number one reason people relate to and love documentary photography is the authenticity which it offers. It captures real moments and situations, events just as they happened, rather than creating an artificial-looking moment or picture. On a bit of a side note, I personally love documentary photography. I lean very heavily into this style with my own photography. But I also love all styles of photography, and I don't think that one is better than another. None of what I'm saying today is about discrediting another style of photography. On the opposite side of the spectrum, when it comes to portraiture, you have editorial photography, another style which I am absolutely in love with. So don't think that my love of documentary photos in any way lessens my love or respect of other styles of photography. Jumping back on topic, one of the key points in documentary photography is often storytelling. Although you can capture a stunning single picture or single image through documentary photography, it is more commonly used in a series of photos. Maybe the most impactful and most easily recognizable documentary photography comes from the decades of work published through National Geographic. Documentary photography is one of the best ways to capture things such as the impact of war, marginalized communities, exploring different cultures, and even capturing everyday life and the human experience. It may seem unglamorous, but it is one of the most important forms of photography, both for present day and for the passing of information down to future generations. That being a bit of an introduction just on what is documentary photography, the question is, why do I love documentary photography? This is my video and I get to talk about what I like. No, but in all seriousness, I think there's so much to see and to learn and to just embrace about documentary photography that I could talk about it for days, hours, months. I just mix those up, but still I could talk about it probably the rest of my life. So I mentioned that my style of photography leans very much into documentary photography, and whether you would consider my photography documentary photography or whether you would simply consider it documentary style photography is up to you. I don't have too much of a preference in how you call it. But the fact is, I do tend very much to not want to direct or pose anyone that I am photographing. Even where I've come in and we have a plan and we've got a good idea or a vision that wants to be achieved by me and my client, or even if I'm just doing a creative shoot, I still very much tend to veer away from what you might think of as the traditional posed, strictly studio, clean cut images. And that's not because I think there's anything wrong with those at all. I've definitely tried doing that many times. I have branched out into various styles of photography, and I don't want to say failed many times, but it's true, I have failed. And it's not because of necessarily my skill level or the photography styles that I tried out. It's more so just the learning experience, and it's something that we're all going to go through. There will be moments that we mess up or we don't get it quite right, and that is not a reflection of ourselves, our skill, or what the thing we're trying. It simply is a moment to learn and continue trying. So how did I end up in a place where I am constantly drawn back to a documentary style in my photography? I think that I'm just simply inspired so much by the human experience and every individual's nature and their character that shines through so beautifully in documentary photography. I think those, what you would call candid moments, and those natural parts of everyday life is just what inspires me the most as a photographer. Now, I also want to add, I've done a lot of event photography, and that has been a big part of developing my skills as a photographer. I worked for a long period as part of a media team with a large organization, and we had several events which I was often the lead in documenting those events. And so I think that is also definitely something which has influenced me a lot. But even before that, I can pose you, I can direct you, I can tell you exactly how to stand. But I've just found that in the photo shoots where I try and do that, I don't actually feel, strangely enough, I feel less connected with my subject, with my model, if I'm constantly directing them. And I think it's because I'm not listening to them. I'm not listening to what they have to say through these photos. And I think that is so important, even if you've hired a model or someone like that. And there are some elements, and there's definitely moments where you want to direct, especially if someone's not comfortable in front of the camera, just giving them a little hand. But also, I think equally valuable, if you don't want to be directing, if you still want to keep that candid element, is to just encourage. You don't have to be strictly by the book or giving them carved out things to do. And again, I have to say, there are so many people that are incredible in their posing technique, and I admire that. I just found that the way I connect best with people when I'm photographing them is through allowing them the space to do what they need to do and express themselves in a natural way, and documenting that rather than directing or posing them in that moment. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but let me talk about how I specifically use directing in my photography. I talked about event photography a little bit, but that's not necessarily what I do as much in present day, although I love shooting weddings, and a wedding is an event, although it's a very specific event and it has very specific parts to it, as well as most commonly a section where you go off and you do portraits. And so there's also that specific side of having that pose moment, etc. So how I use documentary style photography in my photography is really, first of all, developing a connection with whoever it is that I am photographizing, whoever it is that I am photographing. And so it's very simple. It's not a complicated process that I have, but having a conversation, getting to know the person, especially if you don't know them at first, letting them know what I'm going to be doing, what my thought process is, making sure they're comfortable. If they have any questions, answering that. So there's just a few minutes, not a lot of time, sometimes it's a few seconds, just before the photo shoot. Like, you jump into it. Like, I don't just dive in and start taking pictures, but just establish that connection. And then once we're getting into it, I might give them like an area or a general place to be if we're doing a set photo shoot. I'm not talking about events now. Like, I want you to be with that background over there. Let's say we're at the beach, like between that rock and that rock there, or go into the waves. Or if we're in a field, like, I like the tree line over there. How about we have that in the background, so then you can just move around in this space, or whatever it is. Maybe there is a specific activity that we want to do. And I would say that leans into directing, but it is still very loose directing. And I will sometimes have some of that, definitely. But honestly, if I can, I will completely avoid that. And I think one of my favorite things to do is if I have an activity-based photo shoot where I am not the one to choose the activity, but you come to me and say, hey, I'm an artist. Or whatever art you do, whether you do pottery or you do paintings or beadwork, anything, and you say, I'm an artist, I'd love to have you capture me while I'm doing my art. And I come in and you tell me what the important parts of your process are. We try and focus on that, but really you're just going about your day, doing your thing that you normally do, and I will capture those moments without having to influence you or direct you or pose you. Entirely natural, documenting your process and who you are, that aspect of your character, your personality. That is what I love the most. But obviously you cannot always do that, and not everyone has a hobby which is such a key part of their lives. I feel like we should all have hobbies. It's not crucial for us to have a hobby that encompasses our whole lives. And so if you have something that you want more of a neutral photo shoot, or maybe focused in an space rather than an activity, we can definitely still do that. So then where I step in, I kind of feel it out, and there will definitely be times where I give a little bit of posing advice. I prefer advice over directly putting you in a certain position or so, such as telling you to kind of extend your neck, or to make sure that your elbows are bent, or your knees, kind of make sure that you have more shape. Working with triangles, that's always a really great thing. And I've done a video on posing a while back. I might do one again in the future, just giving tips and kind of directing rather than specifically posing, and giving that guidance and technique over putting you in a specific position that may or may not be suited to you. And again, jumping back, like I said, I've tried different styles, and I think every photographer needs to find the style that works the best for them. And I just know that when I am quiet and I'm the observer, I produce the most incredible art. I produce the best photographs, and I capture the truth that I would never even have seen if I hadn't been more reserved, been more in the background, and allowed the moment to develop in front of me. And the same goes for when I'm doing weddings. I absolutely love those candid moments and just documenting the space even, and being less posed, even when it comes to the portraits. And trust me, I love a good editorial style portrait, especially when you have like all the bridesmaids and all the groomsmen, and you've got the couple, and like doing something really fun with that. And I think I personally love the style of like wedding portraits, which are editorial. I just know that for my own art, I don't feel as fulfilled when I take those photos. So I love them as a style, but I know that for me, it just doesn't always happen. And so I am very open and clear about it. I'm like, I am more on a documentary side of photography. So rather than give you something that I'm not my best at such as editorial or more posing shots, I might have a few here and there, and they're going to be great. But to let my focus be on documentary. And if you're interested more in an editorial style of shooting, or just a different style entirely from mine, allowing you the space to find a different photographer, because I think that's also very important, matching your style and your desires with the photographer that you're choosing. Anyway, that's kind of my take on documentary photography. It's It's going to be very different from other photographers' takes on documentary photography. And like I said, everyone's style and opinion is different. And I think that's great. That's part of what makes it art rather than strict science. Even though there is science to photography as well. There are some things that is A plus B equals C, 100%. But I think I really love to focus on the art. And that is the most important part because that's what people connect with. You use the science to create the art. Anyway, let me know if you had any questions. Tell me which style of photography you relate to the best, what you think you would want to have if someone took photos of you with, if you booked a photo shoot, which style of photography would you want to have your photographer focus on? And would that be documentary photography or something else?